I think until the very end, like we have opportunities to improve our basic speed. And I think if we really believe and embrace that idea of what we can do, it just completely changes how we align with the waves that are available for us to surf. And if we find more of the right kind of waves that work with us and go in the right direction, that is the most beautiful kind of free energy that we get to experience in life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Eternal Optimist Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Drinkon, and we are here to share hope that you can do it too. And today we are incredibly blessed. We have an amazing human being here with us today. And I'm not just saying that because I'm looking at him and I say that about everyone. No, Mr. Joe Jacoby is someone who you may know that name if you're in certain circles. Joe is an Olympic gold medal winner. Okay, I'll just lead with that. Yeah, we have an Olympic gold medal winner today. We also have someone is an entrepreneur. He's someone who is an author. He's someone who helps people to catch their second wave in their life. It sparks joy. He helps people build a peak life and get their big impact goals done. And the coolest thing, and I just got to share this, Joe, to start. He just showed me a view over his shoulder out the window that he's sitting at right now. It's in, and I may get this wrong, Las Elderge, which is in Spain, 2 hours from Barcelona. And right outside his window, you can see the Pyrenees Mountains, and he can see the whitewater course or the course in which he won his gold medal back in 1992. So that's absolutely amazing. And Joe's an amazing human. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to someone you probably already have heard of him, but let me try to introduce you to Mr. Joe Jacoby. Joe, welcome to the show, sir.
Matt, it is a pleasure to be here. I tell you, and by the way, I'm so grateful to Dustin Reichman, who connected us and made this possible. And so looking forward to this conversation and getting to know your community a little bit.
Heck yeah. I feel like a kid in a candy store. It's like I can get really fired up if I go to like Staples, an office supply store, or maybe a comic book store, or maybe like some bookstore, or I go to Barnes and Noble every week, right?
Yeah.
But on podcasts, I get to talk to an Olympic gold medalist, which is like super fired up about that. I'm sure everyone wants to talk about that. So let's go a different direction first. You currently have on a shirt that has an amazing, I think that's a squid on it. Can you talk a little bit about what is it you're wearing today on our show here? What is this shirt?
Absolutely. So, you can also see behind me, I've got a few kayak and canoe paddles behind me. And so we will get into the Olympic gold medal side of my life. But the reason I mentioned that was my time paddling whitewater rivers, which I still do a bit. But the long kayak paddles behind me are what I use out in the sea. So at this chapter in my life, I'm spending a lot of time paddling kayaks out in the sea, specifically a special kind of sea kayak called a surf ski, where we surf open water swells, not like shore break, usually following the direction of the wind. And I'm just spending a lot more time around the sea these days with my girlfriend and partner, Maria, and we love to paddle together, and both in the sea and in the river. But I'm spending a lot more time in the sea at this chapter in life, and I absolutely love it, Matt. But you asked about the shirt. Sometimes, like when you have a goal to paddle and you spend more time at the sea, one of the benefits of that is that you spend more time around the sea. Means you eat food around the sea, you buy clothes around the sea, and so this is a shirt that comes from the little town in Catalunya on the Costa Brava, where we like to paddle, called in Llançà. And I have a shirt by the same manufacturer that has a whale on it. And so it's just like a lot of creatures from the sea. And I love it. It's just kind of a fun way to just kind of remind myself in this chapter of my life, I'm really connecting with the sea as much or more than the way I used to connect with moving water and rivers.
Wow. You've said so many things that just fascinate me so far, because my extent of understanding or knowing about kayaking or rafting is when I was in high school. We did a whitewater rafting trip with a family, with a guide. That's it. I've been to the Whitewater Center, U.S. Whitewater Center here in Charlotte.
Yes.
I've been there. We'll talk about that today. So I've been there. I've seen that, but I've not actually been in the water. So when you're talking about the differences between kayaking in a river or in the sea, I'm thinking of like that George Clooney movie, The Perfect Storm. I'm thinking about giant waves coming out. It's kind of frightening a little bit from where I sit. So can you tell us a little bit more? What's the difference between paddling or kayaking? And
such a good
just a little bit of difference. What's the give us the nerd version of this, man? Because I'd love to hear a little bit about the difference between the sea and the river.
Well, let's start metaphorically, big picture. I love this. So I've written a book about navigating all my 45 years navigating whitewater river rapids, winning the Olympic Games, transferred to navigating the river of life. And now today, my latest kind of writing project is a weekly email that I call Thinking in Waves, where I am transferring the lessons that I'm learning surfing these offshore ocean swells, sea swells in a surf ski kayak, transferred to how mental models for making choices, for aligning with our values, and ultimately performing a little bit better. So on the river, there's a lot of similarities actually, but metaphorically speaking, where does the water in the river go? It kind of ends up in the sea eventually. And I kind of feel like I'm in that part of life, but it doesn't mean that paddling in the sea is easier than the river. It's just different. The river is a little bit more of an enclosed space. It's pretty wild. It squeezes together a lot of power and a lot of energy. There's a lot of navigation of obstacles like rocks and hydraulics and such. And I've thought about sort of the strategy and my experiences navigating rivers to navigating life. And I'll just give you in your listeners an example.
Okay.
So often when you're going like whitewater river rafting with the family and there's a big rock in the middle of the river, people are like, oh no, a rock, and we sort of shy away from it and we try to avoid it at all costs. Like we don't want to touch this fixed object in the middle of a moving river. And the funny thing is, what I learned over time is that as we develop a fear of the rock in the middle of the river, we start kind of staying really close to the side of the river. And we end up on these really shallow shoals where we can't get any really good paddle strokes in the water and our boats are kind of dragging over the side of the river. Matt, that's just not a nice way to live life. I like to say, let's get out in the middle of the river where the deep current is, where the power is, where we can align with an energy that's bigger than us. And now let's talk about that rock. And what happens about the rock is that if you actually get close to the rock, what's scientifically happening, the water is bubbling up on the front upstream edge of the rock. And the energy then releases around the side like a little bit faster than anywhere else. So if you actually paddle close to the rock, you actually get better, faster river current to work with. And there's one other advantage too. On the backside of the rock, because energy cannot flow through a fixed object, it creates a pocket of rest of slack water behind the rock called an eddy. Fishermen know about eddies because fish like to stack up in the eddies. It's a nice place to swim. And in kayaking, it's like a rest spot in the middle of raging river rapids. And so my metaphor for kind of navigating the river of life is don't avoid the rocks, aim for the rocks. And it's so counterintuitive because if we've developed a fear of rocks over time and we're kind of just really holding on to that shoals and shallow, junky river next to the riverbank, we're not really in the river of life. And so that's kind of one part of the river metaphor. Now let's switch over to the sea, right?
Okay.
So now we're in the sea, and currents, there can be currents in the river, but mainly now we're talking about waves. And people, you can go on LinkedIn or on social media and business, people love the metaphor of like, hey, dude, let's surf the wave. It's a perfectly good analogy and metaphor, but I think we get a lot of things wrong about that metaphor, or we don't really think about all the implications of what it means to surf a wave. I think in life, as we look around us, I believe there are a lot of people that are catching and surfing waves. I just have a lot of doubt and I have a lot of questions about the direction in which they're surfing. Like, I don't really believe that people are catching waves in the direction that they really want to go. And there are real consequences to catching waves that are taking you in the wrong life direction. It means that the currents and the waves and the winds are taking you further away from where you really want to go. But the lazy thing to do is to just catch those waves and say, dude, I'm surfing a wave. And so I just like to really use the analogy of surfing waves and really check in with people and saying, are these manageable waves for you to surf? Are they realistic? Do you have the ability to surf the kind of waves you want to surf? And number two, are the waves even taking you closer to where you really want to go?
Okay.
Because gosh knows, there are a million waves out there that will take you to where you don't want to go. And I think if you, no matter what your kind of life compass looks like, if you think about that analogy, there are a lot of waves taking you, available to you to take you where you don't want to go.
100%. And I love, let's just stick with the sea and the waves here. I love this analogy. And what it brings up for me is it brings up, do I know where I want to go? Because if I don't, I may just get excited by any wave out there that comes at me, and I could be just going aimlessly around in circles and feeling like I'm getting in shape and feeling like I'm enjoying the time. And then I wake up later when the wave is done. I'm like, where am I? Am I closer or farther from where I want to be or not? So I love the analogy. Just it brings up for me, did I do the inner work to really know what I want or where I want to go? That's what's coming up for me. When you share that.
I love it. I love the way you said it. It's kind of a funny story. A year ago, December, Maria and I went down to southern Spain to Tarifa. We knew there was a guy down there who had these surf ski kayaks, but he doesn't rent them. Like, you have to pay for instruction with him, pay for coaching if you want to use his surf skis.
Okay.
And it's really funny. It's just kind of the nature of canoeing in the United States. But as a kid, after I learned to paddle at summer camp, the canoe clubs that we were a part of, they offered volunteer coaches. And then I got pretty good at a young age, and the Federation provided coaching to me. And then I won an Olympic gold medal at a young age. And private coaching just was not a thing during my career. And so I've always had free coaching in canoeing until a year ago, December. And we went down to Tarifa, Spain to work with this guy, Boyan, who is this big Bulgarian guy living in southern Spain. And he has this surf ski outfit. And Matt, I got to tell you, is the first time I paid for coaching in my life for canoeing, the sport of canoeing.
Yeah.
Is the best coaching I ever had. Like, it was absolutely phenomenal. It was amazing. And so the reason is I kind of want to dig into this because I think people will find this absolutely fascinating. I think at the root of it, I think inside of us, I believe all of us have an inner artist and an inner scientist. And we tend to lean towards one or the other. And there's nothing good or bad about either of those. It's just good to know about if you lean into that. Like, I lean into my inner artist side.
Okay.
Now, Boyan, and I think of surfing waves, by the way, as this very creative act. Like, dude, I'm surfing a wave. Like, don't get in the way of me and my vibe surfing a wave. And Boyan has this 7-step process for surfing a wave. And I initially resisted that process at first because I'm thinking, I don't want science to interrupt my artistic vibe. And he's like, it doesn't interrupt your artistic vibe. It brings context to your artistic and creative sense. It lets you know where you are at any given moment. It will enhance your art if you sort of balance that out. And that was the beginning for me to sort of say, oh, these two things can work together really well. But now I'm kind of a convert. Like I still lean into my creative side when I surf, but I use these 7 steps of surfing a wave to kind of give me context. Now, what I've done is I've taken those 7 steps that Boyan uses to surf a wave, and I've applied it to the way we live our lives. And so, for example, you were just kind of mentioning a moment ago, step 1 in Boyan's process is called basic speed. It doesn't even involve the wave. Your basic speed is like, everyone has a basic speed. It is kind of like your all day, everyday operating energy.
Okay.
And I can make the case, the better that your basic speed is, the more opportunity, the more ability that you will have to surf more different kinds of waves. If you are slow and sluggish and not adaptable, you're going to have a very limited in the kind of waves you can surf. But if you kind of are in a good place in body, mind, and spirit, you're going to increase that ability. And we can always be affecting our basic speed. After step 1, basic speed, steps 2 to 6 are all about the wave. It's about choosing the right wave. It's about the direction of the right wave. It's about timing, acceleration, surfing the wave itself. Like those are steps 2 to 6. And then step 7 is very celebratory. It's literally called yee-haw, which is to kind of have a moment in there to kind of realize how lucky and how fortunate and how grateful we are to have this opportunity to surf waves. But really what's so interesting about these steps is that the first one doesn't even involve the waves. It's just our responsibility to put ourselves in a better position to work with a force of energy that is bigger and greater than we are. And then steps 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 get very technical about how we work with that force, how we work with that energy. And it's so powerful when you start to think about the waves. Just example, step 2 is called wave selection.
Okay.
And one of the biggest changes that I went through as a developing surf ski paddler, I would go to the sea and I would see these amazing waves coming in. And I just sort of felt like every wave should be my wave. And I would paddle so hard and they would just go right under me and pass me right by. And I would just, after 30 minutes, I'd get so frustrated. And Boyan would just watch me and he would just say, Joe. He goes, you don't have the money in your budget to, afford that wave. You need to pick a wave that's in your budget.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it was amazing. He's like, you need to pick waves that are smaller, steeper, waves that fit your ability.
Okay.
Now, apply this to the real world. Like, how many of us like to play pickup basketball, but we're like taking all of our cues off of Steph Curry? It's like insane. It's like, I love Steph Curry. He's an amazing basketball player, but Steph Curry can surf different kind of wave than we could ever surf in the game of basketball.
Highly practiced, one of the best players in the world. I shouldn't be shooting threes from 40 feet. So yeah, I'm with you.
100%. So for example, in the area of wave selection, the most powerful lesson I've learned in the last 12 months is that I now define myself on step 2 by the waves I let pass me by instead of the waves I catch. Like, I am so happy and comfortable when I let a wave go by and say, that's not my wave. That wave isn't for me. It's out of my budget. I don't have the money to pay for that wave.
Okay.
And when having that recognition to sort of know that there is a wave that's out there for, where I am physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that is a powerful awareness. So once I know that, then I can start to get into pay attention to the direction of the wave. Like, I'm not going to surf a wave that's not taking me to where I really want to go. Again, I will let those waves pass. I'm not like so hungry to surf a wave, like I got to catch every wave. And so it's just, I could go on about this topic literally for hours and hours and hours, but this kind of gives you a feel of how we can take what we have in our current state today and how we can align that with energy around us, the things that we don't control, to sort of leverage some of that and really start to grab some of what I call that free energy, the energy that the wave is trying to give us, but do it based on making good choices, choosing waves that are good fit for us, and choosing waves that are going in the right direction for us.
Wow, it brings up so much for me. And what I wrote down that I highlighted was it define ourselves by the waves we let pass by us, not necessarily by the ones that we surf. And what I feel when you say that, Joe, is I feel that how many times have I seen what may be a semi-attractive wave, but it's not really aligned with where I want to go, or it's not really, to be frank, in my breadbasket of skills to follow that wave, but I do it anyways because it just seems like an exciting challenge or something that it's here. Why not do it? But it's not really aligned with who I am. And I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is, learn how to have the discipline to pick the waves that are the right waves for you, so you can harness that energy with what you have, rather than just go after anything, whether it's in your league or way past where you'd want to go. It's pick the right waves and have the discipline to do that, is what I think I'm hearing.
Look, there are so many waves that look good, many waves that look good. And we are living through a period of the world where people are getting really, really good at making their products, making their services look really, really shiny. Really shiny.
Yes.
And I think it's great. I'm not condemning that, or I don't think it's a bad idea, but I do think that it can be, if you don't know yourself, if you don't know your basic speed, you can find yourself chasing a lot of waves that are pretty shiny, but aren't really meant for you. You can watch a certain kind of Steph Curry video and after an hour believe you should be sinking all those 3-point shots, just 10, 11, 30, 50 in a row like he does. But this is the hard part. It's a balance of how you know yourself and how you really look at the conditions around you and what's going to make you happy. And that's why I just love this metaphor, when you really kind of take a little time to invest in it. It's just a nice way to look at what you're doing, who you're connecting with, and what are the kind of choices that you're making in your life. But I too, one of the things that have given me the most pleasure about the last year or so that I've been really thinking like this is this idea of really defining my wave selection by what I let go, not about the waves that I chase. It's really feels good when you dial in on that.
Yeah, something that comes up for me when you're sharing that is that I was so intent and focused on one wave. For me, was maintaining my high level skill as a golfer. Because that's something I used to have a lot of pride in. I tried it professionally. I still maintain the skill, and I wanted to compete in some big national amateur golf tournaments. And I had to step back and realize that, that is probably not the wave for me right now, the high priority. It's like the one in the past that seemed right, but now it's not the right wave. So sometimes I'm kind of in between waves and not really committing to any one and kind of diluting myself. So I'm not really riding any waves, just kind of a little bit on this one, a little bit on that one. And it's back to what I'm interpreting you're sharing, and the lesson I'm learning is to stay disciplined on the waves that matter and the waves that I want to be spending my time on, not just anything that pops up. And I think that happens with so many of us, is that we get stuck by the shiny object syndrome and just start going in many, many directions, rather than, hone in on the wave that gives us the most joy, or the wave that we really want to be a part of. So I love the way you frame it. I like to frame everything in terms of playing golf. And I love the way you frame it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you about this. So,
sure.
And then I'd love to share a little story, but how have you reframed your golf game to fit that narrative, or have you done that? Have you found a way to play golf in a way that satisfies like your level of basic speed where you are now.
Yeah, well, now it's a totally different game because now I've got 3 daughters that are young. So now the reframing of golf is this is an opportunity to connect with my family. So now I'm in here, I make 50 putts a day on the carpet, and 2 of my daughters are either 1 or 2 of them is always with me to do it. They practice with me, so we get to spend time together. We go on the golf course, we play golf. They have their own set of clubs, so they're out there hitting the ball or putting the ball or throwing a disc golf frisbee, right? So they're out there having a good time, and I'm modeling for them. So I'm teaching them and modeling for them, patience and not throwing clubs, just how to be patient, cool, calm under fire, right? When you make mistakes, how you respond to that. So there's a lot of life lessons that maybe in my mind I'm playing out really in depth that they're watching. Right, so I just view it as a time now that I get to go spend with the family, right? And I still get to practice, still get to hone the skills, still get to have fun doing what I love to do. And now it's just a different frame. I get to do it with them. So that's how I've reframed golf nowadays. And I there's no more pressure I put on myself. And actually, my game has never been better than it is right now. Right?
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I love that. So I think by now, I mean, you and the Eternal Optimist community, they know a little bit about some of the success I've had in canoeing and paddling. And, it's interesting. You can see behind me that there are a couple of kayak paddles and a couple of canoeing paddles. But what I love about what you don't know is that one of the canoeing paddles is Maria's, one of the canoeing paddles is mine, one of the kayak paddles is mine, one of the kayak paddles is Maria's, the other kayak paddle belongs to someone else. But what's neat about it, the reason I share this with you is that I've gone through that reframe as well. Like, I had a time in my life where I loved to compete at a high level, but my purpose in paddling in the sea is very clear. I want to see beautiful things from the water with Maria. It's full stop. That's it. That's my purpose when I go paddling in the sea. I want to see beautiful things from the water with Maria. And so that means, like, I hope one day, like, that might mean, like, when we're paddling in the sea, like, we'll see a whale, like, from the boat. Like, that would be amazing. But it doesn't, if that happens, it's not like, check, that's done. It's like every day, like, it could be a sunset, it could be a fish, it could be a wave formation, a reflection. There are so many ways that seeing something beautiful together could play out. And what is interesting is that if I really take that purpose to the next level, now I mentioned basic speed. I have a lot of motivation, like a big part of my motivation to stay in good shape, my running, practicing yoga, flexibility, strength training. I hope to be doing this activity with Maria for a long time. I'm 54. Maria is about the same age as me. We hope to be doing this for a long time. So if we take care of our basic speed, that means we're going to be out on the water for a long time, and it's going to put us in a position to see beautiful things together. Secondly, if we learn to channel the energy of the waves into what we're doing, that's less energy from Joe and Maria and more energy from the ocean, which means we get to stay out on the water longer each day and for years to come, longer than we would have if we let ourselves go. And understanding those concepts and having a reason, a purpose, and I think adapting those goals, like you said in golf, that's what's going to keep you playing golf for a long time. And like, I don't want to jump ahead in a way that kind of freaks you out, Matt, but could you imagine the day when you're actually getting to do this with your grandchildren instead of your daughters? Like, that's going to be so cool. Like, that's the path that we're on now. Like, that's exactly what we're talking about here. So what is that going to motivate you to do on a day-to-day level for the next 15, 20, 30 years? So when that opportunity comes up, like, oh my gosh, Matt is ready to like take advantage of, having these kind of experiences with his grandchildren, not with his daughters, but with his grandchildren.
Wow. This is so timely that you're making this statement, Joe, because I just went through an exercise with one of my coaches in the last week where we sat down and he had me do an exercise where fast forward 30 years, God willing, I'm still alive, 30 years, I'm 76 years of age. And I'd like you to, think about having a conversation with your 76-year-old self. And what is it that your 76-year-old self would like to thank you for and celebrate with you? And I can't say that I've always thought this way. I'm leaning more and more into what I interpret, a lesson that I think you're teaching me that I'm feeling right now is learning to be really present with the people that are around me. And that truly is like the highest goal, if there is such a thing, that we might be able to do, is just to learn to be there with our people rather than distracted with something else or ambitious for our own purpose or our own cause. Just be really present with the people that matter most to us. At least that's something that came up for me that I wanted to celebrate with my 76-year-old self, is that I spent that time, invested that time with my most important people, especially my family. So I appreciate you mentioning the grandkids, and it was a crazy exercise to do. And I loved it. Just thinking about little mini me's in 30 years. Yeah, I like it. But you said something that really resonated. I made a note of, to be aware of and take care of our basic speed. That is what may empower us to be able to do these things for longer and to adapt and maybe stay flexible longer, live longer, just be present longer. I love that, how you take care of your basic speed.
It doesn't have to be, I mean, we're not talking about training like an Olympic champion swimmer. I mean, we're just really, I think it's amazing what we can accomplish in a few minutes per day. I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot to really start to make some improvements and just really small adaptations, small changes that really help to do that. And by the way, I think part of it, it's not just thinking about what we need to do or what we could do, but it's also looking at things that we could also stop doing and, or do less of.
Yes.
And by the way, those two are not the same things. Arthur Brooks, in his book, Strength to Strength, he wrote something along the lines of the absence of unhappiness does not equal happiness. And I think what that line says to me is that, that's like system A and system B thinking. System A is like, what are things that make me happy? But system B is like, how do I remove things or do less things that are making me unhappy? If less unhappiness doesn't equal happiness, that means like I need separate levels of thinking for doing that.
Yes.
And I think it is one of the ways that I approach basic speed these days, is that I look at the things that are kind of getting in the way and like, how can I sort of make those a little bit less? Again, not big changes, but just do a little bit less. How can I create the awareness just to create like little breaks so that I'm not scrolling for an hour? How can I just create a little bit of awareness in there and say, is this making me happy? Could I be doing something different? Those are super, super powerful in doing, shifting a little bit more to what we do want and the kind of productive behaviors that will move us a little bit more closer to the better levels of basic speed.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, because I can notice that when I remove the things that are the stressor, remove the things that are the challenge, or remove the things that they're not bringing happiness, that doesn't make me happy. It just removed that unhappiness. So an example would be when I removed social media from my phone recently. I didn't find that I was happier. I found that I was less distracted, and I was more able to be in a place where I could be happy or could be present and at peace, but removing some of those things. And another example would be removing alcohol. We've been alcohol free for a while now, and having done that, I'm not going to say that it's made me happier. It certainly removed something that did not help me to perform my best athletically, right? Or in the morning, wake up earlier, right? So we remove some of those things. But I tend to be more of a person that likes to go towards the light or go towards what I want rather than remove what I don't want, right? So I would look at, what I want is I want to be flexible like you. On my dreams list for this year is to be able to do tree pose yoga by the end of the year, like to be able to stand in the tree pose, which I'm not able to do at this exact moment for any period of time. So I'm with you. I'd like to focus on what I do want versus removing what I don't want, but I'm with you on both of those, like kind of 2 layers of thinking required, to really master your basic speed.
It's so interesting.
I mean, we can sit here and talk forever about basic speed. I love the analogy. I'd love to go back to one other thing, though. And by the way, we're definitely going to go overtime, probably, because I'm thoroughly enjoying speaking with you. I like to go back to the river. We've talked about the sea and the waves, but we didn't address the river, which was the first thing we talked about. And I think that one of the big lessons, there are advantages in paddling in the powerful current, not near the side where it's playing it safe or it's staying away from the hard stuff or the perceived obstacle. No, stay in the middle, stay where the current is most powerful and go towards the rock, because around the rock is the opportunity to get faster, is the opportunity to get stronger, is the opportunity to take advantage of the momentum around the rock. So I would equate that as to like a Ryan Holiday obstacle is the way type concept of when you're going towards the hard stuff, that's where you can learn or level up or strengthen. So I wanted to pay homage to your analogy on the river and the rock, because that really connected, even more than the wave, but that really connected with me. So loved it.
There's a lot of stoicism in there, by the way. Yeah.
Well, so usually in this conversation, which has gone anywhere near an agenda, and I love it, I like to ask a question about what is something that's very challenging that you have endured or overcome in your world. And I'd love to go back and maybe touch on 1 or 2 things that have been a challenge for you in your life at some point, Joe, that you endured and overcame. So could you take us back to a critical juncture, something that was hard for you, please?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this, and I was trying to think of the right way to say it. I don't know that it was as hard as much as it was, but it involved a lot of courage, a decision that involved a lot of courage. So in relative to the sport of whitewater canoeing, I was born and raised in the Washington, D.C. area, which I know to a lot of people, anyone in the United States listening to this would think, well, there's no advantage to living in Washington, D.C. these days. But I got to tell you, for whitewater canoeing, it's an amazing place to live. The Potomac River has these world-class whitewater river rapids just in this major metropolitan area. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And when I was young, when I was in 10, 11, 12 years old, I was learning to paddle at summer camp. And the group that was training on the Potomac River at that time, they were all world champions and the legendary coach of the sport. And I got invited into the training group at a young age, not because I was good, but really because I just enjoyed showing up. And my mom was a big fan of the character of the people that were in the group. And so I trained with this group for a long time. And even I made the U.S. national team while I was still living in the D.C. area when I was the youngest athlete on the team when I was 17 years old.
Wow.
And I raced in my first couple world championships. But leading to your question, so at this point, whitewater canoeing was not on the Olympic program yet. It was a couple of years in, it was 2 years into my national team career where whitewater, it was 1989, and whitewater was added for the 1992 Olympic program. And that was interesting. Like my canoe partner and I had started to get pretty good at the sport. We were starting to win medals in World Cup races. We came in 5th place at the World Championships, pretty good result. And with the Olympics on the horizon and some money and resources coming into the sport from the U.S. Olympic Committee, we made a really hard decision. And that was to leave Washington, to leave the greatest, most proven training group in the history of our sport. And we moved to Western North Carolina to the Nantahala River down in Swain County, Bryson City, North Carolina.
Yeah.
We moved to the Nantahala, kind of the middle of nowhere, where we could just sort of put all the proverbial eggs in one basket. And it was such an interesting move. It was really bold. And what happened was, instead of being a part of the greatest training group in the world, we were now charged with starting our own training group from scratch. And it was so interesting, Matt, because living at the Nantahala, I think it really brought me a lot closer to the roots of the sport. I often in the beginning questioned whether, leaving a group of world champions was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But I loved just kind of being out in nature, and I love that more remote location. And I love, not being on the schedule and the pace of Washington, D.C., and being on the pace of the Great Smoky Mountains, which was just, it was absolutely amazing. And Appalachia and all that goes along with it. And it was so cool. And so that ended up working out really well for us, because I think that not only did we have it sort of brought out a lot of creativity into our training, into our equipment, and how we sort of designed our pursuit of the 1992 Olympics, but I think that just escaping the training dynamic, of that period in Washington, D.C. was also really good for us as well. That was changing. The disposition of the athletes there were changing. And it was a good thing. So I would just say I don't want to say it was like a hardship, but it took a lot of courage leaving such a top group. I mean, it's like leaving the Chicago Bulls in their peak, in the Michael Jordan peak, to like go start an expansion franchise somewhere else and say like, hey, we want to win the NBA title in 2 years. And it kind of looked more like that. But it was such a great experience for us, and it did work out well. And I think more than anything, I just think it brought us closer to the roots of what paddling a river is kind of meant to be like, just those natural elements, those natural intrinsic attributes of paddling a natural river is so cool.
Yeah. It's amazing you just mentioned this, because literally like 2 weeks ago, I went to the Great Smoky Mountains National Forest for the first time, went camping for the first time in my life. And we were walking up the trail right there, starting in Bryson City. So literally, this is fresh in my mind a couple weeks ago, just thinking about, we always heard a loud sound the entire time of the river. And we would look down, and man, it looked fierce. I mean, there were plenty of rocks right in the middle. Plenty of places that it looked like it was nearly impassable or very difficult to navigate. And just to think that's where you were training at the age of 19-ish, you're training in that very adverse, challenging condition. At least for me, it seemed very challenging. That's pretty cool. That must have taken a lot of courage to leave the top people, like the best players in the world, the best coach in the world, the Potomac, and then to go and do your own. That seems, bravo.
It was different, but and by the way, when you think about growing a sport, is a healthier sport has good training centers in different parts of a country. You don't want to centralize everything. I mean, I do think these days, I think a lot of Olympic committees, not for just canoeing, but for a lot of sports, the lazy thing to do is to just sort of centralize everything. And because it makes it more convenient to sort of support the athletes if they're all in one place. But I think having more clubs and spreading the sport out into more areas, and kind of figuring out what makes a particular culture or a training group, a training dynamic unique and interesting and thriving. It's going to be different between the Nantahala and the Potomac River, and we should embrace both of those. And and then you start to think about, okay, well, like where in life could I be doing that as well? And I saw that a lot in my life. Look, at a later point in my life, I was living in Appalachia in southeastern Tennessee, and I was surrounded by very, very old Appalachian families. And it's so funny, Matt, like with a little bit of distance, I haven't been inside the United States in more than 5 years now. It's been a long time since I've been in the US. But I look at the very pragmatic style of Appalachian living, like, my neighbors, the way they planted gardens, the way they sort of built their houses, the way they kind of raised their family, the way they sort of saved money and bartered, goods. It was so pragmatic and smart, and ideas that, I believe they're timeless, but I believe like could be so interesting and helpful to a country like the United States.
Yes.
And I think the only reason that we lost some of that in Appalachia is just because, it was like there's so much noise in the world that made a lot of people in the culture in Appalachia sort of doubt their kind of way of doing things. Like, just give you a healthy example. Like a lot of my neighbors kind of had a healthy sort of distrust of banks, and they just, and it was interesting. Like it wasn't good or bad, but it was like it ultimately because of that, what supported their lifestyle, it led them to be much like eat healthier food out of their garden, to be more active in their garden. They always had money in savings. They were never extended on credit. And it was like, they were actually like in a really good place to like really enjoy what was most important to them around them. And it was like, I just think sometimes like the way I look at, life in the United States, like how much that really special Appalachian way of life is just so distant and so lost. I'm not saying that we should live like that, but we could, it's a great reflection for all of us that are living very digitally, digitally optimized lives.
Yeah.
That's all good. I love that too. But I think there's some of those values that we could look at that I used to see in my neighbors in southeastern Tennessee or in western North Carolina or North Georgia that, could be really helpful to living a digitally optimized life in the middle of New York City.
Yeah. And I think what comes up for me when you're sharing the story is another story. A friend of mine who had successfully, sold one of their companies and they didn't want for any financial resource anymore. And after they had sold their company, this friend decided, you know what, I've had enough of all this. They sold everything they had. They got a large property, and they literally went out there, and now they live it, and they're a farmer. And I could tell that story for literally half a dozen people that have kind of opted out of what might be the traditional like commerce or business mind, digital place nowadays, and are going back to being really simple and really enjoying it. And that's kind of an aspiration that Julie and I have to some degree, is to get back to a place where we are like we do grow our own food in the backyard. We are trying to figure out a way that we can make, we grow our own food, we make our own food, right? We're trying to create our own clothing and trying to do things from the land, a much more simpler time. Yeah. So that's what I take from what you shared is appreciating the natural things that we have around us instead of there's always got to be more. There's always got to be a technology boost to everything. There's always got to be something we're missing. I like it simple.
Yeah, Matt, in my coaching practice, I'm very fortunate to have clients in Europe, clients in Asia, and clients in the United States. And my favorite part of that is really kind of embracing the different cultures and how people are working with the cultural differences. I think for our children, your children, my daughter, I think that ability to really to figure out how to work in projects with people that are really different than us is going to be critically important to people's success going forward. But the reason I bring this up is that I think in the United States is that it can be really easy to see things either one way or the other, like I have to do this or do that. Yeah. But what you just said is like what I always sort of try to bring forward or ask the question to my clients, especially in the US, is like, great, like what is the smallest possible way that we could integrate an element of, growing your own food or eating food grown close to you, and incorporate that into your life in really small ways, like without changing anything dramatically about what you're doing now. You and your family have real 2024 demands on you that are important to attend to. But like, I'll just give you an example in my own life. I don't eat meat anymore. I think one of my favorite things about living in Catalonia is the relationship I have with these organic farmers in, here in Catalonia. But when I lived in Oklahoma before I moved here, I did eat meat. And if I could go back and change anything about my diet and the way that I ate in Oklahoma, instead of going to Walmart and buying like that 5-pound like pack of ground beef,
yes,
what I would do differently is that maybe once a month, I would go find like a really cool farm, like an hour outside of Oklahoma City, where the farmer is like, or is like doing everything on the farm right there. I would pay more for that opportunity to eat that kind of meat, even if it meant eating less of it, but eating higher quality and supporting a farmer that was like really close to home, and knowing that I was eating meat that didn't have any chemicals in it. It was being done by a farmer who's doing good by his or her land. All those kind of things. Like that's the only thing that I would like do differently. And I bring this story up is that somewhere between what we are doing now and the sort of the idyllic life that we'd like to live, there are a lot of like little steps that we could do, like in between like what we're doing now and like farming and like almost living off the land and like growing all of our own food and making our own clothes. There's a lot of like in between steps. And like, I would just say like, okay, Matt, like how can we find those really small steps to just get a little bit of like, we don't have to wait 10 years till you're in a better position for you to do that. Let's like find the smallest step that we can execute on today that will start to just, see how you like doing that and see if you'd like to do more of that.
Oh, I love the way you're talking about this, Joe. It's exciting because I journal a question. What's something I can commit to doing today that my future self will thank me for? And that's one of my favorite questions every day. And what can you do for like just 5 minutes every day that'll help you lead you towards something that brings you joy or that helps you learn? And what I'm hearing and what you're saying is, you don't have to make a full-on shift and change everything about your life. Just what might be one thing you can do to, well, in your case, and in my case, maybe support a local farmer. Because oddly enough, about 3 years ago, Julie and I got a very similar idea, and we started to buy food from a local CSA and a local farmer. And now that's where we get all of our food, is from that same local farm, right? So it was just so one step at a time, though, right? It wasn't like we changed everything overnight. We still kept going to Harris Teeter. We still kept getting some of the processed stuff in the middle of the aisles, but we started to phase that out as we phased in, like the local organic stuff, right? So yes, to everything you're saying, it's a little bit validating and affirming to me personally to hear you share these things, because I look up to you, and if this is something that Joe is already optimized for and figured out, and I'm somewhere in that stratosphere, I feel like we're doing something right? So it feels like we're maybe at different seasons in life, but we're also attempting to always level up or be aware of our basic speed. And bring things into our basic speed that help us to live longer, healthier, and help the world. So I feel there's a connection on what we're saying.
I was just about to bring this back to basic speed. I'm so glad you did that. But this is how you do it. Like, that's it. There's nothing more to it than that. It doesn't have to be this either or thing. It's not so black and white. There are a million little things in the middle. And if we're not comparing ourselves to the person that is just, sold their company and they've kind of taken $5 million out of it, and they have that ability to go out and do something different. And by the way, it's like, we don't know everything about their life that we'd really want their life. Like, we have our life, and we've got to do good by what we have. Like, that's what basic speed is all about. And I can tell you that just by listening to your story, it's like all the things that you're doing to just give yourself a little bit better opportunity to surf more interesting kinds of waves in the future. It's like, you're doing it, my friend. It's so cool, and having that disposition and being really focused on what you can do with that and put yourself in the best position to surf more different kinds of waves of different shapes, of different sizes, that's going to give you more opportunity, because free energy is the best gift that life gives us. There's just, and the only way to optimize free energy will ultimately be to kind of catch the waves that we really want to surf, that are a good fit for us and are taking us in the direction that we really want to go.
Yes. And Joe, I have one of my most supportive listeners and a dear, dear friend of mine is a huge kayaker and has the kayak, canoe. By the way, what's the difference between a kayak and a canoe? Because I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about. What is the difference, kayak and canoe?
Great question. So in the kayaks come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, river, lakes, ocean. But in the kayak, you're seated like a sit-up position with your feet in front of you.
Okay.
And you're using a two-bladed paddle, like these tall paddles behind me. So, you're balancing paddle on left side, right side, alternating each time. That's kayak. In the canoe, which can be the old open canoes that we used to paddle at summer camp, or even enclosed canoes like the ones I used to race in competition, you're kneeling on two knees, and there's a little bit of support under your butt, and you use a one-bladed paddle, like the short ones behind me, and you paddle primarily on one side of the boat, not exclusively. But those are the difference between the kayak and the canoe.
Thank you. And because I know that my friend is going to nerd out on this story, I'd love to ask if you could share a short story about a time when you were in your the kayak, the one with the smaller, a time. Can you share a story of you going down a river and all of a sudden, holy crud, something happened or something's about to happen? Can you share just any story that come up around just a challenging row that you had in your kayak? Would love to hear that, because I know a friend of mine, he loves the sport and he's looking forward to hearing our conversation. So love to give him something around that.
That's cool. I'll actually share a story that I wrote about in my book, Slalom, which is where I transferred, all these ideas from strategies, experiences from paddling rivers to navigating the river of life.
Yes, sir.
I just remember I was about 14 years old, and the summer camp where I went to camp in the DC area where I learned to paddle. Before camp started, we had gone up to West Virginia for a trip to run a pretty difficult river. And, I didn't, at 14, how much awareness and judgment do you really have about the water and your ability? It's going to be imperfect. And I was having a pretty hard day. But finally, I flipped over in one of these rapids and I swam out of my boat. And, I was okay, but, I was told before the trip, like, look, you really need to have your Eskimo roll, which means when you flip over, you need to be able to right yourself back up without coming out of your boat. You can't bail, because it's really hard to get boats and equipment out on this particular river. It's so continuous, very steep and ongoing. And, I just remember how bad I felt when I swam out of my boat on that day. I could sort of feel, I sort of felt like I was like this weight, like I was a pain for the other people on the trip. Like, I'm taking away from their enjoyment of the sport, and because they're having to look out after me and I'm not really holding up. It was like, and I was thinking, like, I could be a million other places right now. I could be playing like sports with my friends back in Washington and going out for pizza after the game or after practice. And, here I am, and like, I'm cold and I'm scared, and I just, I'm just feeling bad. But like, you're on the river, and it was like, you only have one choice, and it's just to, you get your equipment back, they bring it to you, and you get back in the boat, and it's like, you got to continue on. You got to start from where you are, and you got to find ways to let go of these things that have been kind of bubbling up through the day that have kind of led to this moment. And like, I don't want to say like it became an amazing day when I got back in the boat, but it got better. I made it through the rest of the trip without swimming again. And, I kind of got down, and I just sort of had a chance to sort of reset, choose waves, and now figuratively speaking, choose waves that were more within my range. I didn't paddle rivers that were that hard for, a year or so. I paddled rivers that were more within my ability level. And I got a lot better, and I started to get my confidence back again. But yeah, that's sort of my story that I would tell you, that I just think sometimes we find ourselves in a really low moment where it's just, you just got to find the smallest possible way to get going again and to create a little bit of momentum and, to reconnect with the current again. And, don't try to overpower anything. Don't, just try to not be so judgmental about, the past moment that just happened or the past 1 hour that just happened. But, it's just really try to take the present moment for what it is, starting from where we are with what you got today.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. This has been fantastic. You've mentioned a couple of times books, so I'd love to just share. Where can we find? What are the names of your books? Where can we find them? Where can we find you? Just what are the different ways we might be able to connect with you and learn from you?
Yeah, you got it. So first of all, I always tell people that LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect with me. I post and publish a lot there, and it's really easy to find other ways to connect with me via LinkedIn. So if you go there, that's a good start. My book, which is on Amazon, is called Slalom, 6 river classes about how to confront obstacles, advance amid uncertainty, and bring focus to what matters most. If you just search Slalom, Joe Jacoby, you will find me very easily. It has a beautiful blue cover to it.
I see
You
it.
can get the
I'm
book.
getting it right now.
And finally, I have a link to Thinking in Waves. This is my weekly newsletter that I'm writing right now, Matt. And what I propose we do, we'll share a link to Thinking in Waves where people can sign up for that in the show notes to this podcast, because there's not like an external link. I think if you go to my LinkedIn page, you might be able to sign up for Thinking in Waves there, but we'll make that possible. But if you like the analogies about the way you and I talk today, about applying these ideas of surfing offshore waves and these steps to surfing waves, I think you'll really, really like these short essays that I write every week. They're pretty short and to the point, and I'm having a ball doing it, and I'd love to share Thinking in Waves with your community as well.
Fantastic. And it's just amazing technology nowadays. When you brought up the name of your book, I just went straight to Amazon, and now it's going to be here on Monday. So this is pretty cool. So check out Joe's book on Amazon. You can get it there, and then connect with Joe Jacoby on LinkedIn, my friends. This has been really cool. Joe, thank you for being with us today. I'd love to go to our lightning round to wrap things up today. First, I really wanted to ask you about books first. If there's a book, and maybe up to 3, if you want to go more than one, but if there's between 1 and 3 books that have really had an impact on you that you recommend, what might be a book or two that you'd recommend?
I would say that what are some books that I've really enjoyed? I like to go recent if that's okay.
Yeah.
I love Morgan Housel's book, Same as Ever, that came out a few months ago. It is such a good read. I enjoy almost everything that Adam Grant writes. The Hidden Potential was great, as was Rethinking was awesome. And then more recently, I've read Michael Easter's book. Scarcity Brain was the more recent one. And the one before that, I'm blanking on the name, but Michael Easter's books are so good. And the background for his writing is really good. So those are a couple books that I really enjoy.
Thank you. Let's go to music then. Is there a genre, an artist, or a song that really fills your bucket and inspires you?
Not so much. What I would say about the music right now is that I think living where I live, it's fun to sort of see how some of the kids in La Sauderge, where I live, respond to some of the different kinds of American music. I like that a lot. And for me, I think sometimes when I hear some of that Spanish rhythmic guitar music, it's like that is kind of very acquainted, associated with this part of the world. I love that as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll leave the last thought for you, Joe. We're on the Eternal Optimist podcast. When I say eternal optimist, what might that mean to you?
Oh, this is one I probably should have given more thought to ahead of time, but I think it actually really gets into that last story I was talking about in the canoeing, is about just starting from where we are and doing the best with what we have. I mean, it's I think until the very end, like, we have opportunities to improve our basic speed. And I think if we really believe and embrace that idea of what we can do, it just completely changes how we align with the waves that are available for us to surf. And if we find more of the right kind of waves that work with us and go in the right direction, that is the most beautiful kind of free energy that we get to experience in life. And that would be it for me. This has been an incredible conversation, Matt. Like, I am so excited to get to share this with people. Thank you so much.